All right, so we continue with introduction to human anatomy. In the first part, we talked about some important terminologies used in anatomy. We also looked at the important planes that are applied on the body in anatomical position. We also talked about some what we call reference terms. We discussed terms like anterior in opposition to posterior. We also talked about dorsal, posterior. We also talked about superficial, internal, lateral, in opposition to medial. Now we're going to look at terms of movement. Terms of movement, the previous ones were directional terms. Directional terms are used when you want to direct someone on a particular body part. Now, terms of movement or movement terms refer to various words or terminologies we're going to use in anatomy depending on the movement of a body part in a particular direction. So I have 10 here, and some of them are paired. So let's quickly get into the meat of things. So I'll quickly use diagrams for easier understanding. So the first term we're going to look at under terms of movement is a term referred to as flexion. So flexion, you can see this person with the arm in its natural position, in anatomical position. And then we see the forearm moving from this position up to that. So the movement is occurring here at the elbow joint. Okay. So when the joint bends like this is referred to as flexion. So flexion refers to a bent joint, a joint that has undergone some movement and there's bending at that joint. Whereas the opposite is true. When the joint straightens, then it's called extension. I'm in class, yes. Yes. We'll talk nice.
Oh,
All right.
it's okay. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir. Oh, sir.
I'm in class. Yes. Let me turn off the mic. Okay, sorry for that disturbance. So straightening of the joint is called extension. So you can see this arm is extended and here the joint bends. So that is flexion. Same with the knee. This is a knee joint. That is the ankle joint. So bending at the knee joint is flexion. Straightening like this other leg is straight. So that is flexion. So these movements will provide, these movements at the joint will provide movement of the skeleton in a particular direction. So those are two opposite directions that we expect. Joint bends, flexion. Joint straightens, extension. Now, the thumb also can move in a particular direction. You can see this is flexion of the thumb. It was initially here, like this. So the palm is in this position, in anatomical position, where the thumb is 90 degrees to the other digits. But if you move this thumb to lie at this position, we call that as flexion. Then this will be extension. Okay, flexion, extension. Now let's look at another term, flexion of the trunk. Now this is a trunk, the central part of the body, which composes of the chest and the abdomen. So we call that as a trunk. Some books will say torso. So this is a torso, chest, anterior chest, posterior chest, anterior abdomen, posterior abdomen. This is the trunk. So bending of the body of the trunk in one direction is called flexion as well. So the trunk can flex anteriorly, the trunk can flex laterally, the trunk can also flex posteriorly or dorsally. So in this case, we are seeing this human subject flexing in the lateral side. So we call that as lateral flexion. To be specific, this is the right side of the body, so we call this as right lateral flexion of the trunk. We also have abduction and adduction. These are also opposition movements, all right? So moving of the body part away from the center. This is the center. the mid line, or the median line, if you like. So this is a median line here, or the sagittal plane cuts the body into left and right. So you can see this arm was initially here, then moves to that position. So this action of moving a body part away from the center is called ab, more like your subtraction. So you are removing away. So this is abduction. Then back to its natural position is adduction, like you are adding back that body part to the body. So ab or subtraction, body moves away, that is abduction. Back or addition is called adduction, body part moving towards the midline, which is the center here. Okay. The same thing can occur in the hands, where see the position of the thumb here, and then you move the thumb in front of the other digits. That is abduction of the thumb. Flexion of the thumb, this goes inwards towards the palm, that would be flexion, but abduction, it goes anteriorly. Adduction back to the other fingers. Now, circumduction is a movement that involves all these directions we have talked about. So circumduction involves flexion, it involves extension, it involves abduction, and then finally involves adduction. So it has 4 movements in one: flexion, extension, abduction, and finally adduction. So you can see that this is circumduction of the shoulder joint. This is a shoulder joint. So you can move your arm from this position up to there, back, up, and then in front. So very few joints in the human body have this ability to perform these compound movements, 4 in 1: flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. Then rotation is movement of a joint in a circle around a vertical axis. Okay. You can see that it's more like you are rotating the arm here. So rotation usually occurs at the wrist. So if you're doing your arm like that, so you assume that there's a straight line and then you are rotating against like that. So that is rotation, movement. Okay, like spinning around. In accompaniment to that, we have what we call lateral and medial rotation. So lateral and medial rotation, these are semi-rotations. They are not full cycle. Like in this case, you see where the thumb is, then the thumb comes here. The thumb is lateral, but the way this arm has moved, the thumb is now medial. So you call this as medial rotation because you're rotating the body parts internally towards the center. Then the opposite will be true. If the natural position was here, the first position was here, and then the person moves the palm in such a way that the thumb becomes lateral now. So we call that as lateral rotation. You are rotating a joint, but the direction of that rotation is outwards. So you call that as lateral rotation. So lateral can also be called the external rotation. Medial rotation can also be called the internal rotation. Okay. Then protraction and retraction. So protraction is movement of a body part in front. Let's hope I have diagrams for that. Okay, I don't have. Movement of a body part in front. For example, this one here. The arm is here, and then you raise the arm at 90 degrees. So the arm will lie here. So you're protracting. You're making a body part to move in front. That is called protraction. Retraction is pulling of a body part away from the front. So if the arm was here and then you move it back, that will be retraction. Okay. Like when you're making more like a punching motion, that is protraction. You're making your hand move forward. Then when you're withdrawing, that is retraction. I hope that serves as better explanation for these two movements, protraction and retraction. Then we also have terms such as supination and pronation. Now, supination and pronation applies to the palms. This is a palm. So when a person moves the body part or the hand, to be specific, where the palm is facing you or facing up, that is called the supination. And then you move the hand in such a way that the palm faces backwards or down, that is called pronation. So supination, palm faces up or forward. Pronation, palm faces backwards or downwards. Okay. Then inversion and eversion occurs at the ankle joint. This is the ankle joint. This is the ankle joint. So inversion is movement of the ankle joint in such a way that the sole of the feet faces inside. You see that? This is a sole. These are the toes. Toes, this is a sole. So the movement is inwards. The sole of the foot is facing inwards. So we call that inversion. Eversion is where the sole of the feet faces outwards. So we have various conditions in which babies are born with inverted feet. It is called talibs, equinovarus, or talipeds in short. Now, there's more like a contracture here, where this motion remains permanent. Okay, that usually arises from disorders of muscles in the leg there that pulls the ankle joint in such a fashion, and the baby is born that way. So orthopedic surgery can be done to correct that problem, so that now, with time, the feet can touch, the sole or the feet can touch on the floor. Then dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, these apply to the sole of the feet. Let's hope I have those. Okay, I don't have them. So dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So the sole of the feet is called the plantar surface. Then the upper part of the foot or feet is called the dorsal surface. Here, that's a dorsal surface. So if you're looking down on your foot, you're looking at the dorsal surface or the back of the foot. Then inside there is a plantar surface. So if you move the ankle joint in such a way that the toes face downwards, that is called plantar flexion, because there's movement at the joint there. More like you are stepping on some gears in the motor vehicle. So that stepping motion, you're accelerating, you're applying, pressure on the pedals of the vehicle. That is called plantar flexion. Then when you're withdrawing your foot from the pedals of the vehicle, that is called dorsiflexion. You are moving your foot away from that pedal. Then you're applying pressure on the pedal, that is plantar flexion. There's another movement that is special to the thumb, called opposition of the thumb. So opposition of the thumb is to move the thumb in such a way that the thumb touches the tip of the other fingers, more like you're counting your own fingers using the thumb. So that action is called opposition of the thumb. So it gives us the ability to have so much use with our digits. You can draw, you can, make up something using your hands. Those people that do crafts, curios, and so on. You can write in a very tiny space because you have proper control of our thumbs and fingers in our hands. So that is opposition of the thumb. All right. So that's all about the terms of movement. What we have now here is surface anatomy. Some of the features that you see on the body anteriorly and posteriorly. So that is posterior view. Anterior view, I have it in the area diagram I showed you. Here, this is what you see. And here we have both a female and male subject. You can see some structures there. So that's all about movements, terms that are applied to movement of the body. Okay. That being said, we can look at some level of body organization. All right, again, I'll use a diagram to help me run through this quickly. All right, so I'll start with the smallest level of organization. So the smallest level of organization we consider for the human being are atoms. So we have various atoms that when combined via different types of bonds, it could be covalent, it could be hydrophobic, it could be electrostatic, and all sorts of bonds that you know in chemistry. And those will give us now compounds. Compounds will give us molecules. So this is the tiniest part of a human being, which are atoms. There's nothing more we can get if we split atoms. Well, maybe if you do physics, we can explain more about that. But we start with atoms. So atoms can be one. For example, hydrogen atom. For example, oxygen atoms, carbon atoms. Then if you combine those hydrogen atoms, they will give you hydrogen molecule. Oxygen atoms will give you oxygen molecules. Or it could be a combination. One atom of oxygen, one atom of hydrogen, and two. Sorry. If you have atoms, now we go to molecules, right? Like molecules of hydrogen and oxygen to make water. One molecule of water and two molecules of oxygen will give us water molecule. So now molecules are of two types. We have big molecules and smaller molecules. So the bigger ones, we call them macromolecules. The smaller ones, we call them micromolecules. Example given. Macromolecules, the most important ones are proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. Those are macromolecules, very large molecules, composed of chains and chains of their monomer units. For example, a chain of amino acid will give us protein. A chain of carbohydrates, a chain of monosaccharides will give us carbohydrates. Then a chain of fatty acids will give us lipids. So at this level, there are two macromolecules as well as micromolecules. So you should know what makes up protein, which are amino acid, what makes up fat, fatty acid, carbohydrates, monosaccharides. Molecules combine to form special structures found in the cell called organelles. So before we talk about the cell, we must talk about organelles. Now, organelles do not lie freely. Organelles are always contained inside the cell. So that's why they fall at this level, cellular level. So inside the cell, there are various organelles. The most clear one and the largest of them all, and perhaps the most important, is the nucleus. Says it controls all cellular activity. So you find that there are some cells in the body, when they mature, they lose the nucleus. Example given is a red blood cell. Example given, cells of the skin, the epithelial cells of the skin. They lose a nucleus when they mature. And after that, their days are numbered. They will not survive for too long. For example, red blood cells cannot live longer than 120 days because of lack of nucleus. Afternoon. Hello. How are you? So that's the nucleus. So nucleus can be seen under a microscope. First of all, cells, you can't see them under a microscope. So you need cells, you can only see them using a microscope. You cannot see them without a microscope. It's not possible. Now, under a microscope, the only organelle you'll be able to see is a nucleus. You can't see any other. Okay. You can't see any other organelle apart from a nucleus. So here you can see this is a muscle cell, and that's a nucleus. So things like smooth endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, they are not visible here because they are too small to be seen, but they are there. So organelles give us cells, cells of different types and different functions. Here, we're just giving an example of a muscle. Now, a collection of cells like this form special type of tissues in the body. So tissues are of four types. So we have four basic tissues in the body. So namely, we have muscle tissue. Okay, let me give them in the order that will cover them. The first tissue will be epithelial tissue, followed by connective tissue, which is the most abundant. Then you're going to have muscle tissue, and then you have nerve tissue. So 4. Epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. So here we have seen that muscle tissue can be used, for example, to form various layers of the stomach. You can see that those are layers of muscles which are part of the stomach. Now, the entire stomach is not muscle. It has several other tissues there. So you find connective tissue in the muscle, you find epithelial tissue, like the inner lining of the stomach is mucosa. That is epithelial tissue. Then between the muscle and the mucosa is connective tissue. And then you have muscle outside like that. So tissues give us organs like this, which is the stomach. Then various organs in the body have been adapted to perform a certain function and therefore give us organ systems. For example, you have digestive system. This is a system of a tube that runs from the mouth all the way to the anus. So that tube begins here, goes all the way. So it starts in the head, passes through the neck, chest, in the abdomen, goes into the pelvis. That's where it ends from. So this is the organ system called digestive system. You have others like respiratory, reproductive, urinary, circulatory, or what you call cardiovascular system, composed of different organs that are performing functions that are interrelated. Now, apart from that, organ systems are also related to each other. For example, the digestive system is dependent on the respiratory system because the food that we get from the digestive system needs to be converted into energy, and we need oxygen for that process to be completed. So that oxygen will come from the respiratory system. Once oxygen or energy is made, waste product accumulates, excretory system needs to do that. So the urinary system will do that and remove all the waste from the body. So you will see that when one system is affected, another will be affected. For example, if the urinary system is not functioning well, it will affect the cardiovascular system. That cardiovascular system will affect the respiratory system, it will affect the digestive system, and so on. So systems are interdependent to each other, and systems depend on the organs that are found in that system. Then finally, we have the whole human being there as an organism. So these are the levels of organization upon which you can describe a human being, starting from atomic level all the way to the organism level. All right, so the next discussion, I'll talk about body design and cavities. All right, for now, we can end it here.